It started with a look. Just one glance across the glossy floor of the 2025 CFDA Fashion Awards, and everything shifted. Imagine it, flashbulbs firing like lightning, sequins catching the light like stars, and a room so drenched in perfume and power that you could practically taste the ambition in the air. Then, out of nowhere, silence. A silence that didn't just fill the space, it took it hostage. Because standing there, only a few feet apart, were two of the most talked about women on the planet, Rihanna and Meghan Markle. Before we continue, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell for updates. But this wasn't a sisterhood moment. This wasn't a women supporting women kind of night. No, this was the moment when a single, icy phrase, "I don't know her," would ripple across the internet, ignite global headlines, and remind the world that in the kingdom of fame, not all crowns shine the same. What really happened that night? Why did Rihanna, a woman who shared stages with world leaders and built empires out of authenticity, refuse to even stand next to Meghan Markle for a photo? And how did a moment that should have lasted 5 seconds become one of the most defining celebrity clashes of the decade? This isn't just gossip. It's power politics disguised in couture. It's about what happens when two women, both symbols of transformation, collide under the blinding spotlight of fame. And one of them walks away untouchable, while the other walks away undone. But before we get to the words that made the room freeze, we need to rewind, because this moment wasn't born at the CFDA. It had been simmering for years, beneath layers of red carpet smiles and polite applause. Let's start with the stage itself. The CFDA Fashion Awards. Think of it as the Oscars of style. It's not just a celebration of clothes. It's a display of hierarchy, image, and influence. It's where designers, models, and celebrities all gather to prove one thing: they belong. But belonging comes at a cost, and tonight, Meghan Markle was paying in reputation points. It was her first major appearance in months. She arrived late, intentionally, some whispered, wearing a custom ivory gown that shimmered like wet glass. Every move was calculated, every wave measured. You could almost see the pressure in her posture. Because this wasn't just another event for Meghan. This was a comeback mission, a redemption attempt, after endless headlines that painted her as the fallen Duchess, the outsider, the actress who played royalty and lost her script. And who better to be photographed with than Rihanna, a woman who, without even trying, redefines relevance every time she blinks. A global icon, billionaire entrepreneur, mother, and musician whose silence carries more weight than most people's press conferences. To Meghan, a photo with Rihanna wasn't just a picture, it was currency. The kind that could buy her way back into the world that had quietly closed its velvet doors. But here's the twist. Rihanna wasn't playing. As Meghan's team maneuvered through the crowd, arranging what they thought would be an accidental encounter near the step-and-repeat backdrop, Rihanna was already watching. Calm, composed, almost detached. She'd seen this game before. Rihanna doesn't chase the camera follows her. She doesn't rehearse her authenticity, she lives it. And somewhere deep inside, she already sensed the energy shifting. What nobody realized then was that this wasn't going to be a photo opportunity, it was going to be a public reckoning. Let's rewind a little further. Because to understand Rihanna's reaction, you have to understand the whisper network that runs through Hollywood, the invisible strings that decide who gets close and who gets cut off. You see, behind every red carpet moment, there's a spreadsheet of strategy. Publicists texting under tables, stylists sharing warnings, PR teams running interference. And Meghan Markle's name, by 2025, had become a warning label in certain circles. She's going to try to get a shot with RIH, one insider texted, according to a source close to the event. Don't let it happen. It's not good optics. Optics. That's what this whole thing was about. Because the truth is, Rihanna has spent her career carefully guarding one thing: her brand of realness. She's untouchable precisely because she never begs for belonging. Her image thrives on independence, on the idea that she answers to no one. So when she heard Meghan was in the building, wanting to align energies, as one source phrased it, she didn't see opportunity. She saw intrusion. Still, let's be fair, Meghan wasn't malicious. She was desperate. Imagine living in a world where every gesture, every dress, every word is dissected under a microscope, then twisted into a headline. Imagine losing the royal title that defined you and watching your name become a brand of controversy. Wouldn't you want to reclaim some control? Wouldn't you crave just one photo that said, "I still matter"? But in the fashion world, desperation is the one accessory you can never afford to wear. And that's what made this night so tragic and so fascinating. Cameras clicked. Laughter filled the air. Champagne glasses clinked like musical notes. Rihanna chatted effortlessly with designers, models, and fellow icons. Her laughter carried, warm, genuine, magnetic. Meghan stood just a few feet away, rehearsing a smile in the reflection of a mirrored pillar, waiting for her moment. The tension was invisible but electric. A journalist later said, "You could feel it. The room wasn't breathing." And then, the moment arrived. Meghan approached. She smiled, radiant but stiff. "Hi, Rihanna," she said, extending her hand, the cameras swiveling instantly. Rihanna turned her head slightly. Not cold, not rude, just disinterested. Her voice calm, her tone even. "I don't know her." 3 words. That's all it took. The air cracked. 1,000 unspoken thoughts collided in the silence that followed. And just like that, it was over. But it wasn't just a snub, it was a statement. Because those words, subtle as they seemed, carried the full weight of Hollywood's social order. In that single moment, Rihanna wasn't just refusing a photo. She was drawing a boundary. She was saying, "I'm not part of your narrative." Now, some called it cruel. Others called it iconic. But everyone agreed, it was deliberate. Why? Because Rihanna doesn't do accidents. Every movement she makes is poetry in motion, and that line, "I don't know her," was punctuation. Still, the deeper question remains. Why her? Why Meghan? To the public, both women represented empowerment. Both had faced ridicule and clawed their way to influence. But beneath the surface, they symbolized opposite forces. Rihanna, self-made, unfiltered, immune to pity. Meghan, royal by marriage, media manufactured, perpetually misunderstood. So when those worlds collided, one had to dominate the other. And Rihanna, by saying nothing more, owned the moment entirely. Social media erupted within minutes. Clips surfaced. Body language experts offered analyses. Fans flooded comment sections with divided opinions. "Queen move" versus "so disrespectful" versus "there must be more to this story." And there was. Because hours before that fateful encounter, something happened backstage that changed Rihanna's entire mood. A private conversation. A warning whispered over champagne. A name dropped in passing. One that made Rihanna pause and say, "Oh, really? She's here." The seeds of rejection had already been planted. Now, imagine being Meghan in that moment. The camera is still flashing, her hand half extended, her smile faltering just slightly. The warmth fading from her eyes as she realizes, this photo, the one she thought would save her, will never happen. You could almost see the calculation behind her eyes. Do I laugh it off? Do I walk away? Do I pretend I didn't hear it? She chose the only option that kept her dignity intact. She smiled, quietly, nodded, and walked on. But make no mistake, that moment broke her. Because for someone like Meghan, who has built her entire public existence on being seen, being refused visibility was the ultimate rejection. Now, let's pause here for a second. Do you think Rihanna was being mean, or was she protecting herself? Was she drawing a line between authenticity and opportunism? Between mutual respect and media manipulation? These are questions that divided fans for weeks. But back at the CFDA that night, none of that mattered yet. Because what happened after that moment, behind those closed golden doors, was far more revealing. Meghan's team panicked. They started making calls within minutes. Her publicist reportedly said, "We can spin this." Say they spoke privately later. But they didn't. They never did. Rihanna had already left the building, slipping out quietly, as though nothing had happened. And that's when the real story began to take shape. Because when the silence finally hit social media, it exploded louder than any statement ever could. Clips replayed in slow motion. Analysts broke down facial expressions. The internet crowned Rihanna queen of boundaries. Memes flooded in within the hour. But the most shocking part wasn't the reaction. It was what people discovered next. Because there was history between these two women. Hidden connections. Missed emails. Ghosted charity invitations. Industry warnings that dated back years. And when those old receipts started surfacing online, everything started to make sense. This wasn't about a single photo. It was about years of quiet avoidance that finally played out under the brightest lights possible. But before we get there, let's pause on one thought. Why does this moment matter so much? Because in an era where everyone's trying to look perfect, Rihanna reminded the world that real power doesn't perform. Real power refuses. And Meghan, the eternal actress, the image-conscious Duchess, walked right into that lesson the hard way. It's almost poetic, isn't it? Two women, both shaped by fame, both craving freedom, one finding it by walking away, the other losing it by chasing attention. By the time the after-party started, the whispers had already evolved into headlines. Rihanna snubs Meghan. CFDA's awkward encounter of the year. Duchess denied. But none of them told the whole story. Because this wasn't just a random clash. It was orchestrated by fate, fueled by history, and exposed by one sentence that burned through the glamour like acid. And that's exactly where our story goes next. Into the whispers, the warnings, and the unspoken truths that built up to this collision of worlds. Because someone in Rihanna's circle didn't just anticipate the moment, they made sure it would happen. And when you find out who, you'll realize this wasn't coincidence at all. It was a setup years in the making. It was one of those nights that felt too perfect to be real, like a dream wrapped in velvet and lit by flashbulbs. The 2025 CFDA Fashion Awards had transformed New York City into a living runway. Black cars lined the street outside the Lincoln Center, spilling out designers, celebrities, and power players who all seemed to glide rather than walk. Cameras flashed like fireworks. Reporters screamed names. And in the middle of that chaos, something was brewing, something no one saw coming. Because while everyone else came for fashion, two women arrived carrying history. Rihanna, the icon, the mogul, the woman who turned rebellion into a billion-dollar empire. And Meghan Markle, the Duchess turned Hollywood exile, still fighting to rewrite her story. That night, the air was thick with more than perfume. It was tension disguised as elegance. The reporters didn't know it yet, but the shot that every photographer wanted would never exist. It started hours earlier, backstage. The production team ran on adrenaline and caffeine. Technicians adjusted lighting angles. Designers triple-checked the order of presenters. Assistants whispered reminders like prayers. Keep everything smooth. No drama tonight. But drama has a way of dressing itself up as coincidence. In the dressing area, Meghan sat in front of a mirror surrounded by bulbs, her reflection glowing like glass. Her makeup artist dabbed a final touch of highlighter across her cheekbones. She looked flawless, maybe too flawless. The kind of perfection that feels rehearsed. She smiled, but it didn't quite reach her eyes. "This is it," she whispered. "Tonight we reclaim the narrative." Her stylist nodded, though his expression stayed neutral. He'd been briefed. Meghan wanted to make headlines, but in the right way this time. No scandals, no snubs, just elegance. She wanted the graceful comeback moment, the kind of moment that gets replayed on TikTok under captions like "she's glowing." The plan was simple. She'd present an award. She'd mingle with industry royalty. And most importantly, she'd take a photo with Rihanna. One photo, that's all it would take. The Duchess of Sussex beside the billionaire bad girl of fashion. Two women who broke rules, standing side by side. It was an image Meghan believed could melt her controversy, rebrand her as relevant again. But across the building, Rihanna's team was thinking very differently. Rihanna arrived quietly, no grand announcement, no entourage the size of a parade. Just her, A$AP Rocky, and a few trusted members of her crew. She walked into the venue with that same effortless energy that's made her untouchable. No rush, no nerves, no need to prove a thing. While Meghan was strategizing her return, Rihanna was just existing. And that contrast, authenticity versus effort, would become the theme of the night. Someone from Vogue approached Rihanna near the red carpet. "Are you doing any group shots tonight?" they asked. Rihanna smirked. "Maybe," she said. "Depends on who it's with." It was a throwaway line. Or maybe it wasn't. Because deep down, Rihanna already knew Meghan was in attendance. Her team had told her earlier that morning. "You might run into her," her manager said casually. "She's been reaching out to a few mutuals again." Rihanna didn't respond, just raised an eyebrow. Back in the main hall, guests took their seats beneath chandeliers that looked like frozen fireworks. The show opened with flashing lights and a thunderous track by Drake. Models glided across the stage wearing metallic designs that shimmered like armor. And seated near the front row, just a few chairs apart, were Meghan and Rihanna. The cameras loved it. Producers zoomed in, editors took notes, social media managers whispered, "This is it. This is the moment." But the moment was still a bomb waiting for a spark. As the ceremony unfolded, Meghan clapped politely, smiled for the cameras, leaned over to chat with her seatmates. But she wasn't really watching the show. Her eyes kept flicking toward Rihanna, who was laughing freely, gesturing animatedly, sipping champagne like she had nowhere else to be. Every time the crowd erupted in applause, Meghan's gaze lingered. You could almost feel the longing in it, that yearning to be included again, to belong among the powerful and adored. There was something almost cinematic about it. Two women at the same table, living entirely different stories. Rihanna, confident, grounded, untouchable. Meghan, polished, poised, and painfully aware of every glance that wasn't coming her way. And it wasn't just the audience noticing. Behind the scenes, producers were whispering. One murmured to another, "You think they'll get a shot together?" The other laughed. "Not a chance. RIH doesn't play politics." Then came the intermission. The audience broke into clusters, everyone rising from their seats like champagne bubbles. Conversations, photos, laughter. Meghan saw her opening. "This is it," she told her assistant. "Now or never." She stood up, smoothed her dress, and began to walk toward Rihanna. The crowd shifted, almost unconsciously, as if parting for her. Some turned their heads, sensing something brewing. The energy was magnetic, the kind that happens before a storm. Across the room, Rihanna saw her coming. Her expression didn't change. She placed her glass down, leaned slightly toward Rocky, said something that made him grin. Then she turned back, eyes calm, unreadable. Every camera in the hall seemed to pivot in slow motion. Meghan's heels clicked against the marble like a countdown. 5 steps. 4, 3, 2. She stopped just in front of Rihanna, smile bright, voice warm but a touch too rehearsed. "Rihanna, I've been meaning to." Rihanna didn't stand up. She didn't extend a hand. She just looked at her, tilted her head slightly, and with a calm, almost amused tone, said, "I don't know her." Silence. Not awkward silence, cinematic silence. The kind you can feel crawl up your spine. It was subtle enough that the nearest tables didn't even register what had happened right away. But those who did, they froze. Someone dropped a fork. Another gasped quietly. A camera flash went off and captured Meghan's face in that split second of shock before she recovered her composure. And just like that, the tension snapped. Meghan laughed lightly, a soft, controlled chuckle. "Of course, maybe someday," she said. She turned, hair flowing like nothing happened, and walked back to her table. Rihanna picked up her glass again, her eyes never leaving Meghan's back, her expression unreadable. Maybe indifferent, maybe protective of her space. But here's where it gets interesting. Rihanna didn't say that line to be cruel. At least, that's what insiders would later insist. They said it was about boundaries, about not wanting to be drawn into the storm that followed Meghan wherever she went. See, in the fashion and entertainment world, association matters more than truth. A single photo can create a headline can create a narrative, and once a narrative takes shape, it's nearly impossible to escape it. Rihanna had learned that long ago, the hard way. So when Meghan approached, she saw not a duchess, not a woman in need of kindness, but a walking headline. And Rihanna doesn't do headlines. Still, the reaction was instant. You could feel it in the air. People started whispering, texting under tables. Did she really just say that? Wait, was that shade? The seed of a viral story had just been planted. By the time the show resumed, word had already spread beyond the room. A blogger sitting near the back posted a cryptic tweet. "You won't believe who Rihanna just curved at the CFDA's eyes." Within 10 minutes, it had 1,000 likes. But inside the venue, Meghan sat perfectly still, her smile unwavering. To anyone watching, she looked fine, composed, professional, regal. But her knuckles were white where her hands clasped beneath the tablecloth. Her assistant leaned in, whispering, "It's fine, we'll fix this later." Meghan nodded, eyes locked on the stage, though she wasn't really seeing it. She was already rewriting the moment in her mind, trying to find a version that didn't sting. Across the hall, Rihanna laughed at a joke someone told her. Her laughter rolled like music, Easy, unbothered, real. And that contrast? It told the whole story. Because in that room full of glamour, power, and performance, authenticity stood out like a diamond in a sea of glass. The photographers didn't get their shot. The PR teams didn't get their headlines. But the world was about to get something far more explosive, a story that would ripple across tabloids and timelines for weeks. And the question everyone would soon be asking wasn't just, did Rihanna shade Meghan? It would be why? Because behind that calm, cutting line, "I don't know her," there was a history no one had talked about yet. A string of ignored emails, awkward charity pitches, and whispered warnings that connected these two women long before that night. And when those threads finally unraveled, the truth would make this red carpet snub look like the calm before a hurricane. Because the real story wasn't just about a photo that didn't happen, it was about everything that did, years before that night ever began. But what came next would change everything, and no one saw it coming. Long before that flash-frozen moment at the CFDA Fashion Awards, there was a current running through Hollywood, a quiet hum that only insiders could hear. It wasn't gossip in the tabloid sense. It was strategy disguised as conversation. Stylists whispered it over coffee. Publicists traded it in encrypted group chats. Assistants learned to repeat it only in rooms without microphones. They called it the Whisper Network. It was the invisible nervous system of the entertainment world, a web of warnings, alliances, and favors where everyone knew everyone's story before it ever reached the news. And when Meghan Markle's name started circulating again in early 2025, the whispers didn't sound friendly. She's resurfacing. She's planning a rebrand. She's trying to get close to RIH. That last line spread like perfume. Fast, heady, unforgettable. To the average person, it would have sounded harmless. But in the celebrity world, proximity is power. One photo with the right person can erase a year of bad press. One handshake can rewrite an image. And everyone knew that if Meghan could get Rihanna, the one celebrity who practically radiates unbothered authenticity, to stand next to her, it would look like redemption itself. That's why the warnings started early. Weeks before the awards, Rihanna's stylist got a call from a mutual friend in Los Angeles. "Just a heads up," the friend said, keeping her voice low even though they were alone. "Meghan's team is working the phones. They want to know what you're dressing Rihanna in, what time she's arriving, all that. They're planning something." "Planning what?" the stylist asked. "An introduction. Maybe a photo. They're trying to spin it as two powerful women in fashion. But it's not that simple." And it wasn't. Because behind every casual encounter at an awards show lies a pyramid of negotiations. Publicists aligning angles, brand managers calculating risks, image consultants predicting public reaction. For Rihanna's side, the math didn't add up. Rihanna was in the middle of expanding her Finny empire, a global skincare line launch, a philanthropic partnership, and talks with LVMH about a new creative branch. The last thing she needed was to be dragged into royal family drama, conspiracy rumors, or another round of Hollywood versus Buckingham Palace headlines. So the whisper went up the chain, "Avoid the shot." It wasn't hostility. It was self-preservation. Still, not everyone agreed. One of Rihanna's newer assistants, young, ambitious, social media savvy, tried to argue. "But wouldn't it be good PR?" she said. "Two black women redefining power, standing together? People would love that." Rihanna's longtime manager gave her a look sharp enough to slice glass. "You don't build a billion-dollar brand by being nice for the cameras. You build it by protecting your peace." Meanwhile, on the other side of the continent, Meghan's PR strategist was having a very different conversation. "She's been quiet too long," the strategist said during a planning call. "People are starting to forget. We need a spark, a new image, a symbol." Her communications director chimed in. "If we can get her in the same frame as Rihanna, the internet will lose its mind." That's not a scandal. That's a resurrection. So, quietly, invitations were maneuvered. Schedules were checked. Accidental seating arrangements were suggested to event planners. It was all subtle, invisible to the public, but obvious to anyone who understood the choreography of celebrity. But the Whisper Network heard it anyway. It always does. By the time the CFDA guest list circulated among stylists, word had already reached Rihanna herself. She was in Barbados for a brief trip, lounging on a terrace overlooking the ocean when her manager mentioned it. Meg's team reached out to Vogue. They're pitching some kind of modern icons photo series. You, her, Zendaya, maybe Beyoncé. Rihanna raised one eyebrow. They're grouping me with her? Her manager shrugged. That's the pitch. Rihanna leaned back in her chair, eyes narrowing behind sunglasses. They better find someone else for that lineup. That sentence, calm, unbothered, absolute, traveled faster than any press release. Within days, every major stylist in Los Angeles knew Rihanna wasn't playing along. The invisible wall had been built. But the thing about walls is, people always try to climb them. In the week leading up to the show, Meghan began calling in favors. She reached out to a few designers who'd once dressed her for royal events. Some didn't respond. Others politely declined, citing scheduling conflicts. But one designer, a close friend of Rihanna's, gave her an earful. "Look, Meg," he said gently, "I know you want to change the narrative. But this isn't the way. RIH is not into the scene like that. She doesn't do performative unity. She just is." Meghan forced a laugh. "You're making it sound like I'm chasing her." The designer sighed. "Aren't you?" Silence. That conversation, too, became part of the Whisper network. So by the time both women stepped onto the same carpet that evening, everyone in the inner circle already knew what was coming. They didn't know the words that would be spoken, but they could feel the collision approaching, like thunder behind the walls. Inside the CFDA control booth, one of the producers joked nervously, "This feels like setting two weather systems next to each other and hoping they don't make a storm." He was right. Now, let's talk about how those whispers shaped the night. Rihanna's crew moved like chess players. Her stylist ensured her seat placement kept her surrounded by trusted allies, designers, musicians, creative directors, all of whom understood the code. Keep distractions minimal. Meanwhile, Meghan's team was equally strategic. They tracked Rihanna's movements through staff updates and social media posts. One of Meghan's aides even positioned herself near the entrance with an earpiece, waiting to alert Meghan the moment Rihanna arrived. Think about that. An entire micro-operation for a photo. But in Hollywood, optics are oxygen, and Meghan's image was suffocating. She tried to relaunch her lifestyle brand earlier that year. It flopped. Her Netflix deal had fizzled. Her podcast, rebranded twice, barely cracked the top 50. She needed a narrative reset, and the Whisper Network knew it. So when Rihanna finally entered the venue, the whispers reached their crescendo. There she is. She's in metallic bronze. Keep Meghan seated for now. Rihanna's presence shifted the room instantly. It wasn't loud, it was gravitational. Even people who didn't turn to look somehow felt her walk past. She radiated composure, the kind that comes from knowing you don't owe anyone your attention. Meghan, on the other hand, felt it like static in her chest. That pull, that awareness. Every time a camera flash went off, she wondered, was that Rihanna? Did they get her? And then came the first intersection. During a backstage shuffle between award presentations, both women ended up in the same corridor. Just for a second. Enough to share a look, a polite nod. The air thickened. A photographer nearby instinctively raised his camera and froze when Rihanna's bodyguard shook his head once, subtle but firm. No photo. That was the Whisper Network in action. Invisible. Effective. Later, one journalist from a major fashion outlet confessed off record. "We all got the memo. Rihanna didn't want Meghan near her for press shots. We weren't told why, just don't force it." And in our world, that's gospel. It's wild, isn't it? How entire narratives are built not from what's said publicly, but what's quietly agreed upon behind the scenes. By the time Meghan finally approached Rihanna during intermission, the moment that would explode into headlines, that invisible web had already decided the outcome. And here's where irony strikes hardest. Meghan believed she was about to stage her comeback moment. She thought she was about to win the crowd, the cameras, maybe even Rihanna's respect. But in truth, the stage had already been set against her, long before she ever walked into that hall. The Whisper Network had written her ending in advance. Still, the human part of this story deserves compassion. Imagine walking into a room where every smile hides an opinion about you, where every whisper might be about your fall from grace, where one wrong gesture could be replayed 1,000,000 times by morning. That's the weight Meghan carried into that building. And Rihanna, she carried a different weight. The burden of being the mirror people use to measure authenticity. Everyone projects something onto her. Power, independence, resistance. So she's learned to protect that reflection fiercely. When you put those two energies in one room, something has to break. And it did. After the awards ended and the viral clip began its life online, members of that same Whisper network started leaking context. Screenshots, text messages. She tried to set it up. RIH knew. It was pre-warned. It became clear that the snub wasn't spontaneous. It was the inevitable consequence of too many whispered warnings ignored. But the whispers didn't stop there. The next morning, new rumors started swirling. That one of Rihanna's close friends had been the first to alert her. That Meghan's team had approached multiple stylists for help. That the entire encounter had been anticipated days in advance. Suddenly, everyone wanted to know who lit the fuse. Who told Rihanna to stay away? Because if the whispers were right, this wasn't fate. It was coordination. And that's where our story moves next. Into the corridors where secrets turn into strategy, where friendships become leverage, and where one quiet message changed the course of that entire night. Because the warning that reached Rihanna didn't come from a stranger. It came from someone who knew Meghan better than anyone realized. And when the world found out who, the shockwaves didn't just rattle Hollywood. They reached all the way back across the Atlantic. But that's a story for the next chapter. Every scandal has a slow-motion moment, that split second when time stretches and the air thickens, right before everything goes off the rails. At the 2025 CFDA Fashion Awards, that moment came when Meghan Markle decided she wasn't leaving without her shot. To everyone else, it looked like just another glamorous night. Sequins, champagne, polite laughter echoing through the hall. But beneath the surface, something heavier pulsed. It wasn't music. It was momentum. Rihanna's line, "I don't know her," hadn't happened yet. Not even close. But the universe was already building toward it. Let's rewind to the minutes leading up to the confrontation. The show was halfway through. The lights dimmed for the next segment. Meghan sat at her table, surrounded by stylists, editors, and a handful of influencers who pretended not to glance at her too often. She smiled, nodding when someone complimented her gown, but her mind was elsewhere. She could see Rihanna from across the room, radiant, relaxed, untouchable. She wasn't even trying to command attention, yet every camera seemed to find her anyway. Meghan hated to admit it, but there was something magnetic about that ease. It was the kind of confidence you can't fake, the kind she'd spent her whole career trying to manufacture. "Now's your moment," whispered her PR handler, leaning close. "If you're going to do it now." Between segments, photographers are resetting. Perfect timing. Meghan hesitated. Her heart thudded against her ribs. "You're sure? Positive? Just walk over naturally. Say hello. Compliment her look. Keep it light. You only need one photo." One photo. That phrase again. It sounded so simple, so small, but it carried the weight of her entire reputation. Meghan took a breath, smoothed her dress, and rose. "Excuse me," she said with a polite smile to the table. "I'll be right back." Her heels clicked softly against the marble, each step echoing louder in her mind than it did in the room. The stage lights painted her in soft gold as she crossed the floor. Around her, guests murmured, oblivious at first. But as her path became clear, straight toward Rihanna, heads began to turn. Conversations paused. Glasses froze midair. Across the room, Rihanna noticed. She was mid-conversation with designer Olivier Rousteing, laughing at something he'd said, when she saw Meghan approaching from the corner of her eye. She didn't stiffen. She didn't smile. She just went still. "Hold that thought," she murmured to Olivier. He glanced over his shoulder, saw Meghan, and understood instantly. "Oh," he whispered. "That's happening." "Apparently," Rihanna replied, setting her champagne down. Her expression was unreadable, calm, neutral, almost serene. Inside, though, she was weighing her options. She could get up. She could greet Meghan. She could fake a friendly moment and let the internet devour it. But she'd been warned, and she never ignored her intuition. So instead, she waited. Meghan reached the table, smile perfectly poised, eyes bright. "Rihanna, hi. It's so lovely to see you here," she said in that trained, warm tone she used in interviews. Rihanna turned slowly, her gaze meeting Meghan's. There was a heartbeat of silence. "Lovely to see me?" Rihanna repeated, her voice low, smooth, almost teasing. "That's funny. I don't know you." There it was. The sentence that would echo across the internet for weeks. At that moment, the air around them seemed to stop. You could almost hear the click of 1,000 phones being unlocked under tables, fingers flying across screens as people texted variations of the same message. It's happening. Meghan's smile faltered just for a second, just long enough for cameras to catch it. But she recovered, quick as a professional liar in a press conference. "Oh, well, maybe one day we'll get a chance to chat," she said lightly, her voice softer now, edges trembling. Rihanna smiled, small, polite, final. Maybe. That single word landed like a door closing. And yet, for all its simplicity, the exchange wasn't cruel. It wasn't even loud. That's what made it powerful. In a world addicted to spectacle, Rihanna's restraint was thunderous. But let's zoom in on the psychology for a second. For Meghan, this wasn't just a photo opportunity. It was survival. Her brand had been battered by controversies, Netflix cancellations, and declining public interest. Every event, every appearance had become an uphill battle to reclaim credibility. So when she saw Rihanna, the embodiment of influence, she didn't see a person. She saw a lifeline. And Rihanna? She saw through it instantly. See, authenticity recognizes performance. It's almost instinctive. Rihanna's whole persona is built on refusing to play by the industry's invisible rules. No fake smiles, no forced alliances. And when someone approaches her with an agenda disguised as friendliness, she reads it like a book. Still, the real reason behind her refusal went deeper. According to one insider later that week, Rihanna had already heard unsettling details about how Meghan had treated mutual contacts in the past, collaborators, stylists, charity organizers. There were stories of unpaid follow-ups, public credit grabbing, and strained relationships. None of them catastrophic on their own, but together, they painted a picture Rihanna didn't want to be associated with. So when Meghan approached, Rihanna's decision was already made. The line, "I don't know her," wasn't spur of the moment. It was premeditated. The crowd didn't know any of that, of course. All they saw was a duchess being politely rejected by the Queen of Cool. And that contrast, the desperation versus the detachment, was cinematic perfection. Now, imagine being Meghan in that second. She could feel the cameras. She could feel the whispers. She could feel her entire plan unraveling before her eyes. Her pulse quickened. Her cheeks flushed. But her years of acting kicked in. She gave a little laugh, light, performative, just enough to seem unfazed. "Well," she said softly, "you look beautiful tonight." Rihanna nodded. "Always do." Ouch. It wasn't arrogance. It was armor. Rihanna turned back to her table, conversation resuming as if nothing had happened. Meghan stood there for half a beat longer, caught between pride and panic. Then she nodded again, mostly to herself, and walked away. The second her back was turned, the whispers began. What just happened? Did she actually say that? I swear I heard it. Within minutes, those whispers became digital wildfire. A producer texted a friend. Rihanna just curved Meghan so hard the floor went cold. Another sent. CFDA just became the Met Gala of drama. By the end of the segment, people in the audience were already scrolling through Twitter under the table. The tweet from the previous chapter, "You won't believe who Rihanna just curved at the CFDA's eyes," had exploded. Hashtags were forming. Hashtag I don't know her, hashtag CFDA snub, hashtag RH versus Meg. And Meghan's PR team was in full crisis mode. From their table near the back, her assistant whispered into her phone, "We need to get ahead of this. Spin it. Say it was a misunderstanding." But the truth is, you can't spin authenticity or the lack of it. Because while Meghan scrambled to control the narrative, Rihanna didn't say another word. She didn't tweet, post, or comment. Her silence became the headline. Now, here's where things get even more fascinating. Backstage, a few attendees overheard a brief conversation between two stylists, one from Rihanna's team, one from a neutral fashion house. "I told her this would happen," said the first. "We warned her." She didn't listen? She never does. She thinks every room is still the palace. That line, "She thinks every room is still the palace," summed it up perfectly. Meghan had spent years existing in a world where people couldn't say no to her, where cameras were controlled, narratives managed. But this wasn't Buckingham Palace. This was Rihanna's world, a world where power isn't inherited, it's earned, and reputation is currency. As the night dragged on, Meghan tried to shake it off. She smiled through the remaining segments, applauded at the right moments, even posed for a few friendly photos with other celebrities who pitted her enough to oblige. But everyone could feel the frost in the air. The moment had happened, and there was no undoing it. When the show ended, the exits became chaos again. Journalists, flashbulbs, fans pressing against the velvet ropes. Meghan's car was waiting. Her assistant held the door open. But before stepping inside, she turned and looked back toward the entrance, where Rihanna was still inside, chatting, laughing, radiant. For a second, Meghan looked almost human, not royal, not famous, just wounded. Then the mask slipped back on. She smiled at the cameras, gave a little wave, and ducked into the car. Inside, the silence was suffocating. Her assistant checked her phone. "It's already trending." "How bad?" Meghan asked quietly. The assistant swallowed. "Bad." Meghan exhaled slowly, staring out the window as the car pulled away. "It's always me," she whispered. But here's where the story twists. While Meghan's car drove into the night, somewhere else in the city, a phone buzzed. A message sent from one of Rihanna's trusted inner circle friends. It read, "She tried to make it happen, just like you said she would." Rihanna's reply came minutes later. 3 words. "Good thing we knew." That's the thing about power in Hollywood. It's not just about fame. It's about foresight. And Rihanna's foresight that night didn't just save her from a PR entanglement. It exposed something far bigger. Because that warning she mentioned, it didn't come from her manager, or a stylist, or even a journalist. It came from someone who had once worked closely with Meghan. Someone who knew exactly how she operated, and decided to protect Rihanna instead. And when the identity of that person came out, it sent shockwaves through both women's circles. Because it wasn't just betrayal. It was revenge. But we'll get to that. Because what happened next, the leak, the exposure, the fallout, would turn a single awkward encounter into a full-blown Hollywood Cold War. And by the time the truth reached the headlines, neither woman would ever be the same again. Sometimes, a few words can stop a room cold. And sometimes, those words can rewrite history. That night at the 2025 CFDA Fashion Awards, the words, "I don't know her," did both. The moment was deceptively simple. Meghan Markle had approached Rihanna, ready to charm, smile, and claim one small piece of validation, a photo. One single photograph could have been the currency to buy back relevance. It could have told the world, "I belong. I am part of the tribe." But as she leaned slightly forward, hand extended, the cameras flashing eagerly in anticipation, Rihanna's response cut through the air like a knife. "I don't know her." 3 words. No inflection, no anger, no extra commentary. Just a statement. Polite, calm, final. The room stopped. The click of cameras halted mid-flash. Journalists froze mid-sentence. Social media hadn't even begun to process the magnitude yet. To understand why this simple refusal caused a digital tsunami, you need to understand both women in that exact moment. Rihanna wasn't just refusing a photo. She was drawing a line, a boundary she had meticulously maintained throughout her career. Every decision she's ever made, from empire building to choosing collaborators, has been carefully curated to protect her brand, her authenticity, and her peace. She doesn't play nice for the camera unless it aligns with her vision. She doesn't perform for public validation. She is inherently untouchable because she doesn't depend on the applause of others. Meanwhile, Meghan was performing, consciously or unconsciously. She had spent years mastering charm, wit, and diplomacy, crafting a public image of royalty and sophistication. Her power, however, was contingent. It was based on approval, on being recognized and accepted. And that is exactly why Rihanna's words cut so deep. In the immediate aftermath, you could almost hear the thought process in Meghan's mind. The cameras were recording every nuance, the slight falter in her practiced smile, the flicker of uncertainty in her eyes, the brief hesitation before she acknowledged the words and retreated. That hesitation was all the proof anyone needed. Rihanna's refusal didn't just deny a photo. It denied a narrative. It denied Meghan's carefully constructed claim to relevance. But it wasn't just the moment itself. It was the weight of history. Rihanna had been warned about Meghan's attempts at previous outreach. Whispers carried through the networks of Hollywood insiders. Stylist warnings, offhand comments from mutual collaborators, small red flags ignored by Meghan's team. All of it led to this exact intersection on the red carpet. When Rihanna spoke, she wasn't being dramatic. She wasn't throwing shade. She was exercising control, a lesson in power disguised in calmness. In her world, 3 words were louder than 1,000 headlines. The immediate ripple effects were extraordinary. Flashbulbs popped in rapid succession, journalists scribbled notes furiously, and social media accounts began lighting up. Within moments, snippets of the encounter, grainy, blurry, yet unmistakable, began circulating on Instagram and Twitter. The hashtags exploded. Hashtag I don't know her. Hashtag CFDA snub. Hashtag RH versus Meg. Every corner of the internet dissected it. Commentators debated tone. Fans analyzed body language. Influencers turned it into a meme in under 30 minutes. And through it all, Rihanna didn't need to say another word. Her silence carried authority. It's almost ironic. Meghan had spent her entire public life cultivating attention and influence, often relying on media cycles and public opinion to cement her place. Rihanna, in contrast, had cultivated authenticity and selective visibility. In this moment, those two philosophies collided head-on. One woman asserting her control, the other realizing the fragility of hers. The reaction wasn't limited to social media. Insiders behind the scenes whispered and texted furiously. Designers, stylists, publicists. Everyone had a take. One stylist muttered to a colleague, "Rihanna could have just smiled politely." But this was a lesson in boundaries. Meanwhile, Meghan's PR team scrambled. Their immediate instinct was to frame it as a misunderstanding, to spin the narrative. But they had underestimated the subtle genius of Rihanna's delivery. 3 words, no context, no apology, impossible to misinterpret. The damage was done before they could even begin. Yet, there was a layer most observers missed. It wasn't just about Rihanna refusing Meghan. It was about the optics, the power dynamics, and the cultural subtext. To an outsider, it may have looked like a simple snub. But to those who understood Hollywood, it was a study in hierarchy and influence. Rihanna's refusal wasn't personal, it was professional. It was a strategic act of self-preservation. Consider the symbolism. Rihanna, representing independence, authority, and authenticity. Meghan, representing ambition, validation-seeking, and a complicated legacy. The encounter wasn't just a photo opportunity. It was a public illustration of who controls narratives and who chases them. The immediate audience inside the CFDA hall was a mixture of awe and disbelief. Some murmured under their breath. Others reached for their phones to record, knowing they were witnessing history. The contrast between Meghan's poised professionalism and Rihanna's unbothered calm created a tension that could be felt across the room. Even the cameras caught subtleties others missed. Meghan's hand lingered midair as if waiting for a reaction, then slowly lowered. Her eyes widened fractionally, betraying a brief flash of shock. Rihanna's slight tilt of the head, the smallest curl of a smile, communicated dominance without hostility. It was perfect, calculated, but effortless. Then came the aftermath. The room resumed its energy, but the moment lingered, invisible yet tangible. Conversations paused when someone mentioned it. People replayed it in their heads like a film reel. And while Meghan walked away, maintaining her composure publicly, the mental toll was immediate. Behind the mask of grace, a subtle tremor of disappointment and frustration took hold. It's here that the first domino fell. Because what followed wasn't simply gossip. It was the ignition of a social media firestorm. Clips spread across Twitter, Instagram, and TikTok. Analysts weighed in. Podcasts debated tone. Every angle was scrutinized, from Rihanna's posture to Meghan's recovery smile. Within hours, the encounter dominated headlines worldwide. But the public didn't know everything. They didn't know the whispers that had preceded the event, the warnings Rihanna had received, or the network of insiders who had preemptively advised her on how to handle Meghan. They only saw the tip of the iceberg, the visual and verbal snapshot of a collision between two worlds. And that's what made the phrase so lethal. Context was invisible. The statement floated in space, stripped of backstory, yet imbued with meaning that was instantly understood. It was an authority check, a boundary marker, and a display of self-respect rolled into 3 words. Inside the hall, Meghan's team debated next steps. One publicist suggested approaching Rihanna afterward for a softer, private photo. Another recommended a statement framing the encounter as casual and friendly. But Rihanna had already exited, calm, composed, untouched. The window had closed. That's when the whispers became rumors. People started asking, why would Rihanna refuse? Did she dislike Meghan personally? Did she know something we don't? Or was this simply a matter of protecting her space? Sources close to Rihanna later confirmed the latter. Her refusal was premeditated, based on previous interactions, warnings from mutual contacts, and an acute understanding of how Meghan's presence could complicate the optics of the night. Rihanna's power, she understood, lay in her control over her visibility. She didn't give it away lightly. Meanwhile, Meghan was left to reconcile the public and private dimensions of the snub. She smiled for other photos. She attended the post-ceremony after-party. She tried to salvage composure and influence. But the digital footprint of "I don't know her" had already been cemented. It would echo across timelines and tabloids, shaping perception for months to come. The line, as brief as it was, became a case study in public relations and celebrity hierarchy. Analysts dissected body language, tone, and micro-expressions. Fans dissected intent, motivations, and history. Meme creators transformed it into cultural shorthand for rejection and dominance. And yet, there was more to the story. Because the moment captured on camera was only the surface. Behind it lay years of silent interactions, ignored messages, subtle manipulations, and insider warnings, all feeding into a single, decisive moment. The phrase, "I don't know her," didn't appear out of nowhere. It was the culmination of careful calculation, social instinct, and an acute sense of self-preservation. By the time Meghan exited the event, the online storm had already taken shape. Her PR team scrambled to issue statements. Journalists tracked every move. Stylists and insiders began piecing together the backstory that made Rihanna's refusal inevitable. And while Meghan smiled for the cameras, one thought lingered. The quiet authority of Rihanna had overshadowed everything she tried to control that night. One line, delivered with calm precision, had rewritten the narrative entirely. It was, in every sense, a masterclass in restraint, image control, and silent power. But what Meghan didn't know, and what few understood at that moment, was that this was just the beginning. The Whisper Network, the leaks, the back-channel messages, they were all still unfolding. And by the next morning, the world would begin to see the full scope of the strategy, the warnings, and the history that led to this iconic collision. Because the story wasn't just about a single red carpet refusal. It was about influence, reputation, and the subtle ways power asserts itself when no one is looking. And the real question lingered for everyone watching. Was this the end of the story, or the beginning of a larger reckoning? Every explosive moment has a backstory. Every viral clip, every iconic phrase, every line that freezes a room in awe, comes from a series of small events that few people notice. The phrase, "I don't know her," didn't arrive fully formed. It was built on years of interactions, attempts, and quiet observations. The hidden history that set the stage for that one unforgettable second at the CFDA Fashion Awards. To understand it, we have to start long before the red carpet. Years ago, Meghan Markle, newly engaged to Prince Harry, was still navigating Hollywood. She had the fame, the charm, and the platform. But in certain circles, particularly the music and fashion industries, her access was limited. Rihanna was already an icon, a global force, a woman whose influence transcended genre, geography, and age. And Meghan, though curious and ambitious, was still a relative outsider. The first attempt at contact came years earlier, when Meghan's team sent an invitation for a charity initiative tied to fashion. It wasn't just a standard invite. It was positioned as an opportunity to collaborate on a social impact project, and, according to sources, included a personal note from Meghan herself. Rihanna never responded. Not a word. Some called it a missed connection. Others saw it as a subtle rejection. But for Meghan, it planted the seed that she could, eventually, align herself with the cultural giants she admired. Fast forward a few years. Meghan, now fully immersed in royal life, watched as Rihanna's influence grew exponentially. Her Fenty empire exploded onto the global stage. Music awards, fashion lines, philanthropy, every move was deliberate, impactful, and visible. Meanwhile, Meghan's visibility was largely dictated by media coverage. She didn't create moments the way Rihanna did. She reacted to them. There were other attempts. Emails sent, collaborations hinted at, mutual contacts nudged to create introductions. Some of these attempts were polite. Some were persistent. Some, according to insiders, bordered on overreach. Rihanna's team noticed the pattern and quietly advised her, keep your distance. Don't engage in performative alignment. And that's the key. This wasn't about dislike. It was about strategy, boundaries, and understanding who matters to your personal and professional ecosystem. Rihanna's world is one where every interaction is considered, where authenticity is currency, and where proximity can either elevate or dilute one's influence. Meghan's attempts, while perhaps well-intentioned, carried the weight of media optics, timing, and perceived agenda. The whispers circulated. Rihanna's inner circle, including longtime stylist Yalil, noticed Meghan's efforts. They documented subtle outreach, DMs sent and ignored, phone calls left unanswered, mutual acquaintances approached for soft introductions. Each event became part of an invisible ledger, a record of engagement that influenced the decision on the CFDA red carpet years later. And then there was the infamous charity gala incident. Sources claim Meghan attempted to accidentally cross paths with Rihanna at an event in 2023. Staff recalls that Meghan lingered near Rihanna's table, smiling, trying to initiate conversation multiple times. Rihanna, however, was surrounded by trusted allies and navigated around the attempts gracefully. One insider described it as like watching a masterclass in setting boundaries without confrontation. From Meghan's perspective, these interactions may have seemed like minor setbacks. From Rihanna's perspective, they were clear indicators. This person is seeking visibility, and I must protect my space. It's essential to note that this hidden history isn't just a series of cold rejections. There are nuances. There are moments of politeness, brief nods, neutral interactions, all carefully measured. Rihanna never publicly shamed Meghan. She never took to social media to comment. Every refusal was executed with precision and intention. The stakes were different in 2025. Meghan had left royal life, attempting to establish herself in Hollywood on her own terms. She wanted to be seen as relevant, impactful, and socially conscious. A photograph with Rihanna represented more than a snapshot. It was symbolic of acceptance into the cultural elite. Meanwhile, Rihanna's world operated differently. She wasn't performing for approval. She wasn't negotiating relevance. Every action was internally motivated, measured, and aligned with her values. Accepting a photo with Meghan would have required her to navigate not just Meghan herself, but the media storm and public scrutiny that comes with it. In other words, it wasn't a personal decision, it was professional survival. The history extended even further. Insiders reveal that some mutual contacts had been approached multiple times for introductions or informal meetings between the two women. Some declined due to loyalty to Rihanna. Others hesitated, unsure how engagement with Meghan might be perceived. Over time, a pattern emerged. Rihanna's circle was cautious, protective, and keenly aware of the dynamics at play. When the CFDA approached, Rihanna had the full context. She wasn't entering the night blind. She knew what to expect. She knew Meghan's objectives. She knew the history. And crucially, she knew her own priorities: autonomy, brand integrity, and emotional energy. That's why, when Meghan finally approached on the red carpet, the words were delivered so effortlessly, "I don't know her." They weren't just words. They were the culmination of years of invisible interactions, ignored attempts, and preemptive protection. They were a statement of authority, clarity, and control. Consider the cultural weight of this moment. Meghan, often scrutinized and analyzed for decades, had her reputation challenged in an instant. Rihanna, conversely, reinforced her aura of power without lifting her voice. The dynamic wasn't about personal animosity. It was about power, visibility, and the carefully cultivated rules of Hollywood engagement. Yet, from the outside, the audience saw a simple snub. It made for viral headlines, memes, and endless commentary. But beneath the viral moment lay a complex tapestry of history, strategy, and perception. And this hidden history didn't just influence the red carpet moment. It shaped the aftermath, the leaks, the commentary, and the social media firestorm that followed. People began piecing together the prior interactions, the ignored emails, the subtle warnings. Slowly, the story expanded beyond the CFDA hall, revealing a web of connections, refusals, and silent judgments. It's fascinating to consider the psychology at work. Rihanna's refusal was informed not only by past events but by instinct, pattern recognition, and an acute sense of social dynamics. Meghan's approach, conversely, was driven by hope, ambition, and perhaps a misreading of social cues. Two completely different worlds collided, and the outcome was as inevitable as it was explosive. From a human perspective, the tension is palpable. Imagine being Meghan, approaching someone you admire, hoping for recognition and connection, only to be met with calm indifference. Imagine trying to maintain composure in front of dozens of cameras, while your internal narrative collapses. The emotional stakes were intense, layered, and public. And while the moment was brief, mere seconds captured in video, its reverberations lasted weeks. Analysts dissected body language. Fans debated motives. Reporters interviewed insiders. Social media exploded with opinions and speculation.